I've been saying for weeks that these guys are posing a genuine risk to our safety. The drain on police resources and funding is now inexcusable. So how does the Extinction Rebellion defend their actions? Well, I'm joined now by Donnachadh McCarthy, who is an environmental campaigner for the Extinction Rebellion. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond is every day since that terrible tragedy last week. 28 people died in London from air pollution caused by fossil fuels. Across the world, the United Nations say 400,000 people are already dying from climate emergency. What we are doing is simply sounding the alarm, trying to save future generations, and that's what we're saying. But the government has not responded in a way that's commensurate with the depth of the crisis, and neither have the opposition parties. And we were seeking to put this at the centre of the general election debate.
Donnachadh, do you have any guilt about the way that you have wasted and diverted police resources at a time when in the capital in particular, but all across the country, they are so valiantly and desperately trying to fight terrorism?
How many people have died of terrorism in London in the last year?
Are you honestly asking that question as if that makes it okay? Because number one, I'd love to see your actual proof that these hundreds of people have died specifically because of climate change. Number two, do you not understand, Donnachadh, that the reason why we haven't had hundreds of people dying in London because of terrorism is because of the incredible work that the police do?
I'm the son of a policeman, so I respect what the work the police do. And we are, again and again, when our protests, our peaceful protests have taken place, we have been really impressed with how many police tell us, person to person, how they support us, and they understand that their children's futures are at stake, and they support what we're doing. This is not about £28 million. This is about billions of pounds.
£37 million, Donnachadh. £37 million. Yes.
And how many? Do you know the amount of budget the Tory government has cut from London? 40% of the budget. And what we're saying is the government is actually not taking the action to protect our kids' futures. Why don't you understand that it is unpatriotic to actually advocate lack of action on climate change?
I'm sorry, you're accusing me of being unpatriotic?
Yes, I am.
You're accusing me of being unpatriotic when you go and cause police absolute chaos and carnage when they are trying to fight terrorists.
Excuse me. Extinction Rebellion is a peaceful movement. We have caused no carnage.
Didn't look very peaceful. Didn't look very peaceful at that tube station in London a few weeks ago.
The police stated in their statement on Radio 4 that the real challenge of Extinction Rebellion is that we were so peaceful. That is the main thrust of what we're doing. And what we are simply saying is as a worldwide crisis, the UN has said we are facing extinction. The UN General Secretary said, unless we cut radically our carbon emissions, we face extinction, and it is unpatriotic to sit aside and allow the government not to take the action needed to protect Britain's borders.
Donnachadh, you are using incredibly extreme language. And I also have to point out that...
What language is extreme?
I also have to point out that this country is doing more than virtually any other in the Western world to combat climate change.
That is untrue. Can I tell you what happened? For example, I'll give you two points that those facts are untrue. On the eve of the general election, the Tory government announced that they would give the go-ahead to the Woodside Colliery in Cumbria. That will, for the lifetime of that coal mine, it will emit 8 million tonnes of carbon, which is more than if you shut off the electricity to every household in Britain for 20 years.
I do understand that you want to shut down the British economy. You want us to stop eating meat. You want us to stop flying. And I'm sorry, what you are asking us to do at this point is extremist, especially given the total lack of action from countries like the US and India and China, who are actually the real carbon emitters.
The United Britain, it is actually extreme to not want to protect our kids.
I do
use
want
the
to
word
protect our
carnage.
kids. We're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. We're doing so much more than these other Western democracies. And it's really terrible that you make this a choice between supporting your extremist actions, which would debilitate
There's
the
nothing
British
extreme
economy,
about a peaceful
and change
protest in a
our brilliant
democracy.
way of life.
There's nothing extreme about peaceful protest in a democracy. Indeed, it is normal. What is
Even if it diverts
abnormal?
police resources fighting
What
terrorism
is
and costs
abnormal?
£37 million.
What is abnormal is for somebody responsible in the media like you to describe peaceful protests as carnage. That is emotional language that is damaging Britain's future.
Did you see the
What
video
we
at the
are
tube
saying-
station?
What we are
Did you
saying
see the
is-
video at Canning Town tube station a few weeks ago?
That was
Nothing peaceful
not,
about that, Donnachadh.
Pardon?
Nothing peaceful about that.
There was one person who actually betrayed our principles, and we have actually apologised for that and taken action to it. It was not approved by the movement. It was not done in our name. And I personally was very, very disappointed what happened at that event. It was not done by our name. But in any organisation of 250,000 people, there will
What about a whole lot of people dressed as
bees?
bees attaching themselves to Joe Swinson, the leader of the Liberal Democrats' bus this week, even though it's an electric bus?
Did you hear the news last week, Dan, where the United Nations stated that,
Sorry, can you just
we
answer
are
my
now
question?
facing record rise in CO2?
Oh my goodness!
Do you know what that means?
Absolutely.
You're from Australia, aren't you?
From New Zealand. And can I just say, I've been an environmentalist ever since I was a very, very young child. I was a member of the Kiwi Conservation Group. As a child, I campaigned and did so much work in order to raise awareness of our shrinking ozone hole. And what that showed is that action, which is sensible, can make a change and make a difference, because actually the ozone levels over New Zealand now are so much better. So I am an environmental campaigner, actually. I'm just absolutely opposed to your anarchist and extreme actions, Donnachadh, that are costing our police so much money. And this is the thing. You can't automatically say, because I'm against your group, that I'm for climate change or I'm a climate change denier, because I'm not.
The fact that the ozone layer is healing was actually because, you're right, governments in the world got together, they made an agreement, and they started cutting HFCs, yeah?
And we're doing that now.
And that worked successfully.
Sorry. So did you miss it, Donnachadh, when the government declared a climate emergency in this country? We're doing so much.
On carbon emissions, the governments of the world have met every year for 30 years, and our emissions are going up at record level, including the United Kingdom, where we fund 15% of the global fossil fuel industry from the City of London.
So, Donnachadh, I just want to get back to the point, though. I just want to get back to the point. Regardless of the terrorist threat to the capital, you will continue with these 12 days of crisis protests, no matter what strain and drain they cause police resources.
One of the main protests that we're doing at the moment is simply 5 peaceful people, including 2 granddads, holding a hunger strike outside the party headquarters to try and bring attention to the crises. That is not a carnage or extreme. It is in tradition of peaceful protest. These are 76-year-old grandfathers, 68-year-old grandfathers,
how ridiculous.
and a mother.
How ridiculous that they're doing that.
I think to mock people who are so
putting their own health at
about
risk.
crisis
Silly.
as being ridiculous is rather sad.
Absolutely silly.
Do you understand that you rightly raised the ozone hole, but would you accept that for 30 years carbon emissions have continued to rise despite governments meeting every year? Is that true or not?
What I would say is what I always say, Donnachadh, which is that it's not the government of this country that you should be targeting. It's China, and it's the US, and it's India, and it's the Asian governments, and it's Russia. We are doing so much. We're doing so much. But you want to change our way of life, and that's my issue. You want to stop us eating meat. You want to stop farming in this country. You want to stop us taking long-haul flights, actually flights whatsoever. It's extreme what the Extinction Rebellion are proposing. It's extreme, and you're going to debilitate our economy.
Did you watch the idea that Britain, which is responsible for 15% of the global financing for the fossil fuels, should not do anything, doesn't make any sense.
No, but we're doing so much. We're going to be carbon neutral by 2050, which is achievable.
The government stating we're going to be carbon neutral in 2050 was actually giving something like, what is it, another £4,000 million grant in tax cuts to the car industry last week Doesn't make any sense. What they're saying, they're like NATO.
Is there nothing that you can say that the British government has done positively?
Yes,
Well, go on. Let's end positively. What have they done? Give me
What
something
they've done-
positive that the government's
No,
done.
that's fair enough. What the government has done is actually has supported the decarbonisation of the electricity grid.
Yes, there you
down
go.
40-50%.
That's good.
However, in the family home, for the average family, electricity is around 5% of the carbon emissions of that family. If we don't tackle cars, flying, meat eating, consumerism.
I know. You want to ban my meat. You want to ban my meat. You want to ban my flights. And I'm telling you, the British public are not there with you at this point. But what I'm most disgusted about is, and actually I just make a plea to you, Donnachadh, I make a plea to your organisation. Stop diverting police resources from terrorism and violent crime. It's irresponsible. It's costing us. It's costing us money. It's costing us in our safety. I'm making a plea to the Extinction Rebellion. Don't do it anymore. £37 million wasted. Not to mention the hours and hours of police time.
And how many £1 billion was being spent on destroying our kids' futures? It's a drop in the ocean of what's destroying.
I'm talking about terrorism. I'm talking
talking
about
about death.
terrorism.
Do we care about deaths? Total number of deaths or 2 deaths?
Yes,
2 deaths is terrible.
I've already said
28
I've been
deaths
an
is
environmental
terrible.
campaigner since I was 7 years old.